What is up? Happy Canada Day. Happy almost USA Day. The holiday week. And it's free agency. This is the Clean Hits Podcast. Welcome to Everything Utah Hockey Club Talk. Huge weekend, right? Just a crazy, giant weekend for the team, starting from Friday all the way to today. We have a ton of news to break down. We're going to talk about free agency. We're going to kind of talk about the trades that happened over the weekend, even though we do kind of have a whole podcast episode about that. We're going to talk a little bit about the draft again. We did break down the top 12 2 nights ago. But we're going to talk a little bit more on the Utah side of things there. And then we will have a more in-depth full draft podcast coming out soon. But big day for the team. Big weekend for the team. How's everybody doing? How are you guys feeling? Trent, what's up?
I'm just, sick of refreshing all day long. Refresh all day, right? It's UFA day. It's always that way. What big mistakes are we going to make or hopefully not make? Are we going to find any bargains? Are we going to get completely left out in the cold and not find any dance partners? It reminds me a little bit of middle school, right? All the gossip, all the hurt feelings, all the mean comments. UFA Day is an emotional mess, and where the draft is this like wonderful experience where everyone's happy and everyone's optimistic, it strikes me that UFA Day is a day where there's a lot of criticisms and a lot of bad blood and a lot of grumpy fans, and it's sort of the opposite. So it kind of is fitting that they're smashed so close together. It's almost like the NHL needs to level out all those positive vibes and just kind of balance things out with some more negativity on UFA Day. At least that's my perception. Not sure how you guys see it.
Yeah, not only holiday week in Canada and the United States, but in hockey too, right? It feels like decades ago now that the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup, but that was just over a week ago.
We've had the I actually could not believe that. I had to ask Elisa, my partner, this morning. I was like, was the Cup last Monday? It's been a long week.
And since then, they've had awards, they've had buyouts, they had the draft, 2 days of the draft, and now free agency. So lots going on and still more to come.
And they've lost a bunch of players out of Florida, and there's others still yet to sign, and who knows what's going on. Yeah, such a fast turn. Yep.
Yeah. Well, before we get into free agency, this is the Clean Hits crew. This is the Clean Hits podcast show. We also have a Substack where we keep on dropping podcasts, what are we talking about? Blog articles. We dropped 2 today. So we highlighted the first round selection of Tija Ginla and the John Moreno trade. Corey wrote an awesome piece on Sergachev, which we dropped yesterday. So make sure you check us out at cleanhits.substack.com. Give us a subscribe so you can get that sent directly to your email, so you can kind of read those articles on the go. You don't need to worry about going to the website to see what's new. It will come to you. It's awesome. And then obviously we do have a paid membership there that will get you a lot of exclusive content, since about, 2/3 of the content right now is free for all subscribers. But as we get further into the season, there are going to be a lot more exclusive articles out there. And make sure to give us a follow on Twitter/X at Clean Hits Hockey, and find us on our YouTube, Spotify channel. And if anyone has set up an Apple Podcast, shoot us a message. I am struggling. I am starting to show my age, my gray, my beard's coming out, and man, it's not the easiest thing to figure out. So if anybody has some advice on that, I'd love to hear it. But today, free agency, the day of mistakes, the day team rosters can totally change and maybe excite fans initially and then wildly disappoint them down the road. The other night, after we ended our draft talk, we were reminiscing about the Ryan Suter, Zach Parise controversial signing with Minnesota, which was, did we say that was 2013? So it's it's been over a decade now, and they are still dealing with those cap hits. So lots of teams will go in hard and bring on players with lots of term, lots of money. Luckily, the new CBA has helped kind of reduce general managers from really making some terrible mistakes, but it still happens, obviously. But in GMBA, we trust. And I thought the couple moves we made today we're kind of sneaky. So we signed Ian Cole for a 1-year deal. We brought in Stenlund from Florida. Excuse me if I pronounce his name wrong, which is a nice fourth line center. Lots of kind of defensive tools in that toolbox there. And then an old familiar name with Kevin Connaughton's came back for a little bit of depth, which I did not even realize he was still in the league. But that was kind of fun to see that name. Yeah. So, any initial reactions, Corey? What were you thinking?
Yeah,
well,
it's a
before that, we Brad, we forgot to intro Corey and ask him how he was doing. He's the man of the hour. This is his big day today, right?
That is very true.
Right, Corey?
Canada Day, and I think this is the only, and I'm not anti-Canadian or anything like that, but I think this is the only piece of Canadian clothing I have. So I couldn't possibly care any less about baseball. But when you do go to Jays games, you have something to wear, and then this has the maple leaf on it, right? So happy birthday, Canada! If anyone wants to do the math from 2024 minus 1867, they're very welcome to. But yeah, today it's a interesting day, right? Because it's like Christmas. You kind of want something, but at the same time, you look at what everyone else is getting, and there's just a lot of buyer's remorse today. You look at what Toronto did, the 6 years for Chris Tanev, and when the contract's not even dry yet, and you're talking about how we can get out of this deal in a couple of years from now, that's not a good deal, right? And stick taps to Bill Armstrong to get what he did done over the last couple of days, because coming into today, if he had to sign 4 defensemen, that's a tough task, right? We would have had a handful of ugly contracts, and a little bit quiet the moves he made, but accomplished a couple of things that he needed to do. Got one more top 4D, got another depth forward. I don't think he's done yet. He might be done in free agency, but check 2 of the boxes that he needed to check today.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point you make about getting some of that work done over the weekend. And that's a point that Bill returned to, saying that it's a hard hill to climb if you haven't been able to shore up some of the needs going into UFA Day. And we saw some teams who had a lot of big holes to fill that weren't successful in doing so via the trade route, who had to go big today. And I think it's going to end up being in ways that they're going to live to regret. And I think that Bill executed on a plan extremely well. He swung 2 big trades over the weekend without derailing his draft. He still made 11 picks, 2 in the first round, after having acquired what's going to be their number 1 pairing of 2 defensemen in their prime. And he was still able to fill the prospect pool with additional talent and then head into UFA Day with all the leverage and some pretty smaller holes to fill as far as depth is concerned. So I think that he had a plan, he executed it well, and then as he head into free agency day today, he was able to exercise a lot of self-discipline and not go crazy, not start adding solutions in search of a problem. I know that Brandon Montour was a big name floated around, but how much sense did that fit make, right? And if we were swept up in the moment and looking to add just any big name, I'm not sure where that fits in the lineup. And you end up hurting some of the pieces you already have on board, like Dursey, because you brought in this big contract. So I think there was a lot of great discipline exercised by the management team today. A lot of ability to resist that urge to make yet another big splash and stay the talk of the town for one more day. So I'm proud of the team for what they did today, and very satisfied generally with the moves.
Yeah, and Armstrong even went into free agency the past couple of weeks talking to outlets saying that this isn't how you build a team. You don't go out swinging in free agency because, what we were all hinting at, that it comes back and burns you eventually. And this isn't a team that's going to be winning the cup yet. Like we can all admit that. This is a team that may be knocking at the doors of the playoffs this year. Maybe could even sneak in if some things go right and they can stay healthy. But This is another. I mean, actually, Armstrong even said in year 4 of a rebuild, it's very rare that you make the playoffs. So I know this is all very exciting. If you're a newer fan to hockey, you may be hearing about these big moves that the team is making too. But I do think it's appropriate to set your expectations that this is going to be probably a middle of the pack team that's going to be exciting to watch. They were 16th. They're tied for 15th for goals for per game last season. But there's still work to be done. And I am also very glad he didn't go out swinging and bringing in anybody that was going to be potentially a boat anchor down the road. And the Montour discussion was really interesting because the rumors were building up after the Sergachev trade happened, which we will talk about momentarily, but it didn't make sense after Sergachev. And I'm excited that there was a plan B there. So it does seem like if we couldn't get a trade done for a top defenseman, he was willing to go in on Montour in free agency. And granted, Montour is 30. He was going to be making a good amount of money for a 30-year-old. There were a lot of reasons why I wasn't infatuated with that idea, but if it came down to it, I wouldn't have hated that type of move and even the contract that Seattle gave him, just to have kind of that top defenseman that can start eating minutes, help quarterback a power play, and start kind of progressing the team. But I much prefer the direction we went, and I much prefer kind of the smaller moves and the tweaks of the roster that Armstrong made in free agency this season. And as a Coyotes fan, we are pretty used to lackluster free agencies where you're kind of happy with the presents you get. If it's Christmas Day, you aren't getting the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation 5 here. You're kind of excited to get the extra game controller, right?
I think what the Coyotes were getting, they were getting the paddle with the ball on the string, right?
Yeah.
Everyone else was an N64.
Yeah,
that's so true. There was a time when this is the kind of UFA day we would have had. But we wouldn't have had the trades to go into the weekend with. We would have gone into the weekend with all of our eggs in the UFA basket and still struck out.
I remember one of the most exciting free agencies was when we were rumored to be on James Van Riemsdyk way back when, like before he went to the Flyers, I believe, or re-signed with the Flyers.
Yep, that's right.
And that was exciting. That was wow, we may be getting a top 6 forward.
I remember the insiders saying that James Van Riemsdyk might sign late at night. And that they were giving updates all the way up until midnight or 1 a.m. or something. And I believe finally he did sign with Philly in the wee hours. But I remember as Coyotes fans, we were up into the wee hours of the morning, refreshing our phone, wondering if we were going to get James Van Riemsdyk, a guy who I recently saw fire 6 pucks at Portnoy, the Barstool guy, some blogger, who stopped literally all of JVR's shots. I'm not kidding. A 48-year-old blogger stopped everything JVR fired at him, and this was recently, and that was the apple of our eye as very depressed Coyotes fans. So a good reality to live in, wherein the team has the assets to make the trades they need so that they're not dependent on everybody's leftovers on the free agency market. It's usually guys on that market are there for a reason. I mean, you're not going to get prime age star players who contribute at an elite level on the UFA market, generally speaking. I mean, even today, there were strong rumors that it was going to be Sam Reinhart out there. Well, that didn't happen. They kept Sam Reinhart, right? Montour's the one who made it out to market. OEL's the one who made it out to market, right?
Yeah.
These are not, these are very good players, but these are not foundational cornerstone players of your franchise, and to try to get those in free agency almost always ends up being a mistake. So very glad with the approach here.
So let's start talking about those signings we did make. So the first one, and probably the most significant, not even probably the most significant one here, is Ian Cole, who signs a nice 1-year deal at $3.1 million. Now, this is definitely the definition of a journeyman who brings a lot of grit. He brings good, strong defensive capabilities. He's kind of your classic stay-at-home defenseman. lot of good veteran presence, which is something we were severely lacking last season. And a left-hand D. So really, when you start to think of what our defensive pairs are going to look like now, it's going to most likely be Sergachev as our top left hand, with most likely John Moreno as a top right hand. Now we got Ian Cole potentially manning that second line with John Jersey as his defensive partner. I love it. This was exactly kind of what I was hammering for when we were talking about this on Saturday. I was kind of hoping we'd get Brandon Dillon, who plays a similar style, but is a little bit more nasty, a little bit meaner, a little bit tougher. It comes with a little less baggage too, but he also came with a much bigger price tag. So thoughts on Ian Cole?
I think just what I alluded to earlier is he checks a lot of the boxes, right? And as you said there, just a defensive presence, comes in, can play that top four spot on the left side behind Sergachev now, can probably likely to be paired with Jersey, right? If you're going to put Marino and Sergachev together, Jersey and this new player together, it's going to allow Jersey to, really play that offensive game on the right side. He can join the rush. He can almost be a fourth forward. Really checks a lot of the boxes. And I think another thing too is prior to, I guess, this past week, this team with not a lack of, veteran voices specifically, but a lack of championship experience. There was nobody on this team. Bill Armstrong was the only one with the Stanley Cup ring. So now they brought in Sergachev, who's got 2 rings. Who else has got a ring now? Everyone, I think, who came in today has got a ring. Stemlin's got a ring with the Panthers, and then this edition as well. And I really like as well that it's a 1-year deal. It's almost similar to Bukestad up front, who I think he's got 1 year left, and then he can go away in a year. A young center can come in, and then 1 year for this player as well. And then in a year from now, maybe that's Simashev taking over that spot on the left side.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that, he checked some boxes, and we made some moves that made us weaker at positions we were already a little weak at. And what I mean by that is last year, the Coyotes had the 25th ranked penalty kill in the league. It was a problem. And our top penalty killing defensemen were, in terms of average shorthanded ice time per game, were Matt Dumba, Travis Dermott, and JJ Moser, none of whom are with the team any longer, right? Dermott and Dumba were no loss, and Moser had to go to upgrade us significantly from a power play and even strength perspective with Sergachev, who's not going to fill that role on the penalty kill. But Cole was the number 1 penalty killer from a defensive standpoint on the Vancouver Canucks, who were an average penalty killing team last year. I think they were 16th or 17th in the league. So Cole comes in and bolsters that PK from the blue line. The addition of Marino is going to help in that regard as well. But this was a team that struggled with killing penalties effectively last season. And I think that Bill Armstrong had it in his head that he was going to get that addressed this season. Cole is going to help with that, as well as Marino and the other big acquisition today, Stenlund. And to your point, Corey, there's a lot of playoff experience. There's a lot of championship experience. We went from 0 Stanley Cup championships on our signed roster to 5. 5 rings are in that locker room now, 0 to 5.
Wow.
We more than, I believe we tripled or more than doubled the number of playoff game experience on the roster as well this weekend. So
shout out to Jazz Jargon for kind of putting out a nice little chart on that. Make sure you have given him a follow on Twitter if you haven't seen him before.
At Jazz Jargon, he's the man. He put up a great chart that we retweeted that really breaks that down. So you're adding veteran experience, you're adding playoff experience, you're adding championship experience, and you're adding the effectiveness on the penalty kill. I know that with the New Jersey Devils, they were like a top 10 PK in the league, and we've got Marino, who is a top penalty killer for them as well. So you can expect to see a big uptick. I mean, the Florida Panthers were top 10 in the league in penalty killing, and now we're getting Stenlund as well. So this is an area where we should see a big improvement just from the personnel changes that we've added this weekend.
I think especially on that back end, you look at some of the names year over year to swap out Who were some of the guys they had last year? They had Josh Brown, they had Travis Dermott, Matt Dumba for a good chunk of the year, and you can dump those three, and you can bring in Marino, you can bring in Ian Cole, and you can bring in Sergachev, and then you can. I mean, Dursey was here, but you can more appropriately slot him. That's might
right.
be the best, arguably one of the better upgrades across the whole league, right? If you look at the top four.
Absolutely, and I think
Yeah.
that placing Dursey on that second pair instead of the first pair makes the top four so much stronger. He was in over his head. He's an offensive specialist. He's a good one, and there's some upside there, but he's a young player without much league experience, and he ran out of gas big time over the course of the season. And I think if he can be placed more appropriately, to your point, Corey, partnered with a responsible veteran presence like Ian Cole, who can cover for him, let him run around like the wild pony that he is, and really make the most out of Dursey instead of asking him to do too much, getting him in over his head, and really not doing the player or the team any favors in so doing. I think we've strengthened the team above him, added an ideal partner to accentuate what it is that he brings to the table, and really makes the whole unit more cohesive with more defined identities and roles. And this is what we see on winning teams, is a group of guys who everyone knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and the role they're placed in is the one that best suits what they bring to the table. And we look a little bit more like that today than we did at any point last season or at any point in seasons in a long time.
And the other big contract too is, and this might be the most important one of the last couple of days, was the Sean Dursey extension. I think a lot of people thought it was going to come in around $5 million, maybe a little bit more. Now it did come in at $6 million, but it bought 2 UFA years as well, right? And only 4 years, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I don't know if Sean Dursey was a great player. We heard a lot of the warnings from Kings fans that he was a bit of a train wreck in his own zone, and we didn't see that last year. And that was with him playing on a very after the second half of the season, and not a very good team, but playing top minutes that he's probably shouldn't do. And we didn't really see that. And now he's been rewarded with this extension. And as much as a good player as he was, he's not really a core player, right? Long term. So you don't really want Sean Dursey for 7 years. So he can hold it down for the next 4. And then some of these guys we have coming up will take his spot in the long term. So yeah, 4-year deal for him. I believe it's front loaded as well. 4-year deal.
It is, yeah.
Bucks. And, cap's going up too, right? We're probably only 3-4 years away from the cap hitting $100 million. So if you can have a number 4D, maybe first power play guy for $6 million, that's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, 6% on your cap is pretty good. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my jaw just about dropped because I saw the tweet and I saw 7.1 mil on year one. I was like, oh man, did we just sign Dursey to 4 years by 7? But then I saw the breakdown. Also, it saying it out loud, $6 million for a second line PP specialist, good puck mover still, and he's got a little bit of two-way play now. I think we saw that last year, but that $6 million right now is going to look a lot more like what a typical $4 million contract looks like in 2 more years here as the cap keeps on going up. It's going up this year. It's expected to continue to rise. So we've been kind of stuck in that flat cap era for a little bit. So it's going to take a little bit of time for all of us to adjust. But yeah, so if you see people kind of squawking around saying that it's way too much money, just kind of give them a gentle nudge that things could be a lot worse, and you could be signing Stevenson to a 7-year deal.
Well, there were a lot of people making those claims from glass houses yesterday that aren't going to be so quick to throw stones today after what we witnessed on this free agency market. So he already looks a whole heck of a lot better and more valuable from a contract perspective just 24 hours later. So I think we're already well on the road there. And I saw some of that online too about Sergachev, $8.5 million, but he's never been a true number one. He's always been second fiddle, and it's 8.5. That contract is a bad contract. Talk to me in 2 years, right? He's signed for 6 years at that rate. If he can get anywhere near where he was at pre-injury, even if that's the top of the mountain for him, that's going to be fantastic value in pretty short order.
And
absolutely,
really fun day for Mikhail Sergachev today, right? That $6 million bonus comes into the bank. So that's right.
Happy Canada Day to him. Yes.
And that's Dick Taps as well to Ryan Smith, because the reality is that in the Alex Morello era, these deals are not happening if he's due that amount of money. So
No.
really hard to recruit players when you're offering cop nights at the Sahara, right? So now we have real cash, we can bring in players. So just a huge day for him and the team.
Yep, 100%. So last kind of more notable person to discuss is Kevin Stenlund from Florida Panthers. 2 years, $2 million average, which is fantastic. I am glad we got him on a more than a 1 year deal. I'm glad he'll be around for 2 full years or hopefully full seasons here at least. Kind of poking around. He's a guy who I've seen play a little bit because I did love watching my Ice Cats, especially through the entire Cup run, and they were kind of my East Coast team this season. But obviously, those kind of more depth players are people you take in as much as some of the superstars when it's not your primary team. But this guy pretty much is your definition of a PKer, perfect fourth line center. Visions of Boyd Gordon run through my head when I read more about him and kind of rewatch some of the viewings. Just kind of a guy who does all the little things right. In a lot of ways, it's like a John Moreno playing in the forward role and center role. What do you guys think of this? I think this is a kind of the other little tinkering that we need because one, you can never have too many centers, as Coyotes fans always know. And two, the penalty kill has been a really weak point that the team has faced for multiple seasons now.
Yeah, you can never have too many centers, so you could put him on the wing, but I am curious to see where he slots in the lineup because if he is the 4C, so that's going to move Jack McBain up to the third spot. And then I guess the 1-2-3 is some combination of Bukestad and Barrett Hayton, assuming he's coming back, and then Logan Cooley as well. So, not the best center depth, but a lot better than it's been historically. But yeah, just curious where he's going to fit in the lineup, Stenlund.
Yeah, I think that Nick Bukestad has played as much wing as he has center in the league. I think that Nick Bukestad is maybe the guy you want playing center in the offensive zone a little bit more. And Stenlund is one that you maybe want playing center in the defensive zone a little bit more. And what's nice is we now have a right-handed shot for those matchup faceoffs, depending on which circle you're in and who he's matched up against, that we have a reliable face-off guy with size and defensive acumen who can take those crucial defensive zone face-offs. He did indeed lead the Panthers in shorthanded time on ice for forwards last season for average per game time on ice. He's a big, rangy guy. Not the meanest, most aggressive. He's not going to be dropping the gloves and beating people up. He's not going to be Jack McBain laying them to waste. But I think a good foil there, right? So Barrett Hayton's a bit of a question mark. He has not been able to keep himself healthy. He's not been able to keep himself consistent. We're hopeful that Barrett Hayton's going to be able to play that role of sharing the top six center duties with Logan Cooley. But if Hayton misses time again, this gives us the opportunity to move Nick Bukestad up to the top six, where he's shown that he can flourish without killing our depth on the forward side, without having to slot Kerfoot in at center in the bottom six, where he's better utilized as a winger up and down the lineup. This gives us an opportunity to have Stenlund and McBain fill those roles and be really quality matchup centers. I think that if Stenlund and McBain prove to be able to take that step and be good matchup shutdown centers, having both of those guys in your bottom six is amazing, especially if you've got Nick Bukestad then on the wing and Alex Kerfoot on the wing in what would be the bottom six. Josh Doan down there too. I mean, some really good, high energy, high skill wingers that are not out of place in the grind game and matched up against other teams' top players, right? So I think that it gives us a lot of optionality.
There you go. I was waiting for it.
and I think it gives us a lot of depth and the ability not to be so hamstrung and just crippled by any little injury that comes along. And that's where depth is key. And this is experienced, veteran, versatile depth that can be effective in a variety of ways and roles within your lineup.
And just to go back to Barrett Hayton, he's a really interesting case too, because he was drafted by the prior management, right? John Chaika a premium piece of the John Chaika era. So
Yep.
restricted
Premium.
free agent, yeah, if you're throwing in optionality, we're going to use premium as well. But yeah, curious to see where he fits. And if you dial it back to maybe a week or so ago when Bill Armstrong was on KSL, I believe it was, and he was talking about the negotiations that were coming, the Liam O'Brien extension that wasn't quite done yet. He mentioned those negotiations. He mentioned Sean Dursey. He mentioned JJ Moser, who's now out the door. But he didn't say anything about Hayton too, which was kind of the next name on the list. So curious to see where he ends up. He did get his qualifying offer, which I think is over $2 million. Which, I mean, if that's the deal, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But curious to see where he fits. And I'm still hopeful for Marco Rossi. I have no idea why the Wild are shopping him. I think he was on the ballot for the Calder. He's just a really solid player. We know Andre Tourné is a huge fan of this player. He's a little small for the center position. I think he's 5'9", 5'10", but he's kind of built like Max Domi, where he is a thicker player, really hard to knock off the puck, really strong. And if we're putting somebody at center, I'd rather top line center I'd rather go Marco Rossi than Barrett Hayton if that is an option.
Yeah, it could be, right? Depending on how the negotiations are going, Marco Rossi would be an interesting name to add to the mix, and maybe someone who you feel more comfortable bringing into your lineup as a winger center hybrid. And then you're glad that you've got the extra center depth in Stenlund, right? I mean, perhaps you put Rossi on a line with Bukestad, and depending on the size and quality of the opposition center, you decide who's going to take the faceoffs on that line, right? That could be an option for them too. Marco Rossi, of course, is an old Ottawa 67 favorite of Andre Tourné, who said he was his favorite player ever, or the perfect player. He used to just heap praises upon Rossi. Loves his motor, loves his brain, loves everything about him. So I'm sure he'd be a welcome addition for Andre Tourné. And he's not the only center out there that's rumored to be available that has some ties, or at least some loose ties to this organization. There's the Rossi rumors, and then the Tourné connection, but there's also a lot of rumors flying around about Shane Pinto, who for a long time, from Ottawa insiders, in fact, not even the national guys or the local Arizona guys, was rumored to be something that Bill Armstrong was pursuing heavily during the Jacob Chychrun trade negotiations. Ultimately, we saw futures, but there was some chatter that maybe there was going to be some additions to Chychrun in a package for Pinto, who at that time was coming back from a gambling suspension, probably a one-time off-ice problem for that kid. It seemed like a very stupid mistake, but a mistake rather than a problem or a habit. But nonetheless, we were tied to Pinto and rumored to be really heavily in on him at that time. So, I mean, maybe there's another opportunity there now that we have Stenlund in the fold to maybe include Barrett Hayton or something else in a
nice change of scenery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Bruce Garriock, who's really tied in with the Ottawa organization, reporting that the Pinto camp is even looking for an offer sheet because he's a restricted free agent. Now, I think that's going to push an offer sheet would be a first rounder plus, which for the 2025 draft. Now, that's a very steep price. I don't think Bill Armstrong's interested in that. And I doubt probably any team is as good as a player Shane Pinto can be. So I don't know what the trade would be, but I don't think they would go down the offer sheet route. And that would be a fun path as a new team, right? To start throwing around offer sheets.
Let Ryan Smith
hates us.
Let Ryan Smith go on stage after that and say, "What have we ever done to you people?" Then they'd really know after an offer sheet, right? And you can get creative with that, right? If the compensation is a first and a third, and the first is then guaranteed, and we're uncomfortable with the guaranteed first, how easy would it be to place a top 10 protection on that first, and then just up the third to a second and work it as a trade rather than a true offer sheet? If you can come to terms with the free agent player, and you're threatening, "Hey, look, we're going to do this offer sheet, but we'd rather sweeten the pot for you and put some protections on the first." Maybe they're willing to talk. There's a lot of different ways these things can go. There's not a lot of offer sheets in the league, but I do believe offer sheets have been used in the past as leverage to create trades, sometimes in ways the press gets a hold of, but I think a lot of times it happens quietly as well.
Oh, absolutely. If you remember when the Leafs brought in Phil Kessel, Brian Burke was threatening the Bruins at the time with the offer sheet, right? He even brought back required one of Toronto's own picks, because if you do an offer sheet, it has to be with your own picks. It can't be anyone else's. Brought back one of their own picks that had been previously dealt And now the threat of the offer sheet was real. So it was either, hey, Boston, you're going to trade us Kessel for these players, or we're going to do this offer sheet. So let us know what you want to do. And then just a note on the Senators. If you're moving Shane Pinto, don't you want real players back? This is a team that really needs to start pushing for the playoffs. So draft picks, they're nice, but they just kind of kick the can down the road. And you got a new owner there. You have a new GM, new coach. I don't think draft picks are really all that attractive to the Senators right now.
They might be interested in a Sault Ste. Marie Greyhound, local Ontario boy. Barrett Hayton, maybe not as productive as Pinto has been, but has some promise, and maybe there's ways to
different skill set, and you have Stutzla at the top anyway. So it's an interesting fit, and I mean, as we kind of continue through free agency, that's kind of where the rumors like this will start to build up, which can also lead to more trades. But speaking about trades, before we start talking about those two again that happened this weekend, I did want to bring up a comment. Do you guys think this is going to be a 90 to 95 point team, or more like an 85 point team? So if we are betting people, which I am, over and under on the 90, or are you thinking it's going to be more of that over under on the 85? Personally, I think we are still looking more at that 85 to 90 range, but we have made some significant improvements that make me think a little bit more that there could be some extra wins in there. I know we had a 14-game losing streak that was rumored to be partially because the players were starting to hear the rumors about relocation, which kind of really brought them down and made it a little bit more difficult to kind of focus with playing on the ice. But the Central got pretty tough too. I mean, we're going to have a healthier Colorado. Still going to be interesting to see what they do about Nichushkin. We have a Nashville team who just loaded up, a Winnipeg team who I thought was going to start kind of a downward spiral, but after last season, looks like they can be still a really defensive juggernaut, and is still kind of figuring out some of these prospects and how they're going to integrate into the lineup. Chicago's still going to be bad, but St. Louis is another one of those kind of weird wild card spots. I actually think we could probably jump St. Louis this season as they kind of work through their retool. But what do you guys think? 90 to 95 or more in that 85 to 90 range?
I think it's high 80s. I think you're bang on with the division. That's going to be this team's most challenging thing. You look at some of the teams they're going to have to try and get points away from. But last year, 77 points, right? And you mentioned that 14-game winless streak, but if they can go 500 even during that streak, that's 7 more points. That takes them to 84 last year. I don't think that's necessarily unreachable. They had a 7-point jump from the previous year, right? 70 to 77. So 80, I think it's a 500 team, which is 82 points, but pushing high 80s, I don't think that's unrealistic. I think they're probably about where the Red Wings were this year. You're missing the playoffs by a handful of points, but a couple things go right, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they scratch 90, low 90s.
Yeah, I would
if Armstrong's not done.
Yeah, if he's not done too, right? I think I would tend to agree if the roster is set as is for the most part, apart from some tinkering or some surprises at camp. I think that's kind of the range. I'd go for the under on 90. I'm not too worried about the forwards. We saw some really good production out of them last year. I expect
720 scoring players on this roster, so the scoring is there,
and they're young, and I expect them to improve. I think that'll get better. A full season of Gunther, a full season of Dome, Cooley's adjusted now. I think we're going to see a lot of great stuff out of the forwards, and we've made some really big additions to the blue line, which is really positive to see. But I think defensemen are famously a little bit slower to gel and adapt to new teams and new systems. And I don't think that we're going to see the best out of Sergachev or the best out of Moreno. Ian Cole's a bit of a journeyman. He might have it down pat by now, So he might hit the ground running. But the others, the whole first pair, if you will, is going to take a little while to adjust, I think. And then add to that the goaltending, where we've got Karelvich, Melka, who's pretty inconsistent generally. And we have Connor Ingram, who we all love. I mean, who doesn't adore Connor Ingram? He's so easy to root for. We love him. He's shown tremendous potential his entire career. all the way back to when he was a teenager. I mean, he's put up amazing numbers in juniors, the AHL. There's been spurts in the NHL where he's done it. He's had some personal setbacks. He's had some situations that have arisen in his career that have kind of hit the pause button on him, to where he's a little bit of a, not even necessarily a late bloomer, but a late arriver on the scene, right? And I think that there's a little bit of risk involved with Connor Ingram. I hate to say it out loud. I don't want to speak this into the ether, but it is a little concern that bothers me in the back of my mind, that can he sustain this? Is he the real deal? Did he have one amazing season? And can he do this for the long haul? We've seen a lot of goalies who've gotten some hardware and gotten some press one season of their career. It's a thing in the NHL.
Goalies are voodoo.
A list of guys who had an amazing year or two and pretty otherwise pedestrian careers. Look at the struggles of Jordan Binnington. There's many. There's many faces. Andrew Raycroft won Rookie of the Year and never did anything again. We could go on, and I hope that Connor Ingram is not in that situation. But I look at this team and I don't feel sure enough about our goaltending to feel that I'm going to put some money down on them making the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident in Connor Ingram, but my thing with him is he's still very much growing into that starter's role, right? He played 50 games last year, but the year prior with Arizona, played 27, and then not a whole lot of NHL experience before that. Played a handful of games with Nashville, but just looking at his card here, so 54 games with Milwaukee the year before that, and then you got to go all the way back to his time in the WHL. Kamloops in 2017, 45 games. Year before that, 61. Year before that, 52. So, I mean, nowadays you're kind of looking for 55, high 50s starter for a goalie. He's going to have to take an even bigger workload next year, right? If you want him to really hit that next level, are we confident that he can hold down 58 games and still continue to play well?
Exactly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. This will be kind of the test year for him. And then again, the goalies will have up and downs in their career. Even when you think the most solid goaltender and renowned goaltender in the league is about ready to crush it, they can pull a Igor Shesterkin like he did last season, or
Bobrovsky,
Matt Murray, the collapse of Matt Murray wins a cup and then just can't figure it out again. So even if Ingram has a setback this year, would it surprise me if the following season he looks rock solid again? No, not at all. But let's go into those trades then, because that is really what kind of capped off this weekend. Saturday morning, of course, the team trades for Mikhail Sergachev, and moments later get John Moreno, and within 5 minutes, I don't know if I've ever seen this before, acquire potentially their top pair of defensemen. Now, we talked quite a bit about this in depth on the last podcast. Corey wrote a great piece on Mikhail Sergachev, and I also just contributed a piece on John Moreno on the Substack, so you can go find that on cleanhits.substack.com. But now that the dust has settled, I just want to spend a couple more moments on kind of those thoughts of those trades. Do you guys still view them in a positive light, a more neutral light, or has things changed and you're kind of wishing the haul that we gave was a little too much and that we had some of that draft capital stockpile? Thoughts on that, especially within the context of free agency? I have a feeling I know which side we're all going to be on here, but I just want to hear from you too.
Yeah, no, all positive for me. Like we spoke about the other day, really gave further detail into why they went with Iginla and two forwards at the top of the draft when Bill Armstrong had those two deals in his pocket. It's not like he went into the draft Saturday morning and was just starting those negotiations. Those deals were probably almost done at that point. Sergachev's somebody who's going to fit in with the core of this team, age-wise, with Clayton Keller, with Lawson Krause, with
same draft here.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He's somebody who's he's coming in with 2 Stanley Cup rings. He's somebody who can play in all situations. This is a really great addition for this team. Probably, I know we mentioned Phil Kessel and Taylor Hall the other day, those 2 trades, but probably the biggest trade in this organization's history. I would think so. It's got to be up there, right? Way back to
Olli Jokinen way back in the day was a big deal.
Oh,
JR, no. First came in. But
well, that probably would still account for number one, but that was probably a year where many of our viewers weren't born. So
Yes, true. I remember it,
or some
but
of our viewers.
I'm crazy. Yeah. So as a, as the resident prospect guy, um, it hurt to lose Geeky.
Yeah.
I've invested a lot of time and energy following Geeky and watching his games every season. I was a huge advocate of his in his draft year and was very elated when they moved up and got him. Very, very excited that he was in the pool, very excited about his future. But we're not the Boston Bruins or the Pittsburgh Penguins, where if we deal a single solid top end prospect, our whole pool is decimated, right? This is a team that's been stockpiling and stockpiling and stockpiling to where we can afford to lose a Geeky without it really hurting the balance of the pool or the depth of the pool, right? Bill Armstrong has added so many first round picks. He's had the run of 4 drafts, right? The Dylan Gunther pick was not ours. We got it from Vancouver in the OEL trade. So that's 1 first he added. Then the next year he added 2, but one of them is gone now. So the other one that he added was Maverick Lamara. So that's 2. Then he added the Daniel Boot first from the Ottawa trade. So that's 3. And then this year he moved up to get Cole Baudouin. So that's 4. So in 4 drafts, we still have 4 extra firsts that Bill Armstrong was able to secure for us. And that's not to mention just the litany of seconds and thirds and top 100 picks that we've selected, even knowing that we've subtracted 2 for McBain and Dursey, and then 1 in Moser, who's out the door, and several others that we've traded. We've still used and selected and kept and retained so many weapons with those picks that have bolstered this prospect pool to be just phenomenal. And then add to that the firsts that were ours organically in Cooley and Tijik Inland, Mitch Simashev, and we can recover quickly. What we couldn't get is in his prime, proven to be just at that level, 50-50 shot at least of being a true blue number 1 defenseman. Those are really hard to acquire. You almost never can get them. You certainly can't in free agency, and you certainly can't for cheap. And the fact that we were able to pay a price that didn't feel like it gutted the organizational depth in any way, really, it doesn't feel that way, that we could get a piece like that for a price that wasn't devastating, is phenomenal work by Bill Armstrong. And he set the table to be able to do that by stocking those coffers so much that we could afford to part with some of it and barely even notice, especially given we traded up for Cole Baudouin, and there's your ready.
There's another center
right there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it hurts. And my initial reaction was a little bit unsure, but as I've considered it over time, I felt better and better about it as the days and hours have passed.
Like who do you want on the back end? Just gonna say, like, who do you want on the back end? Do you want Sergachev, who I believe he's just turned 26 for $8.5 million, or Brady Shea gets a 7-year deal today for $7 million. He's 30. That deal is going to take him until he's 37, 38 years old. Brady Shea's a good player, but I'd rather spend $1.5 million more, even if we give up the assets and have Sergachev.
Or Slavin. That was another one of the UFAs that I know a lot of the Utah Coyotes fans were really interested to maybe take a swing at in free agency. And I'm in the same exact boat. As appealing as that would have been, it was one of those situations of, but the best years of those players are going to be the years where we're not quite there yet. And granted, I think it's really important to have the top pairing defenseman as we bring in the kids, and especially the younger defensemen. But where are we looking at once those players are actually integrated in the system? And now we got a guy who's going to be closer to their ages by the time Simachev's playing his 2nd year. It's awesome. Another note that I was thinking about is these opportunities don't always come about to be able to acquire a defenseman, a top-ish defenseman, a top-ish center, a top-ish winger, without a lot of different circumstances.
Yeah.
Lightning got beat. They got spanked by Florida in the first round. They had to get Stamkos re-signed. They had some defensive issues last season. They bring in McDonough a month before the NHL draft and free agency via trade. All of these kind of compounded to the ability of them being comfortable with allowing Sergachev to go. I know there's some rumors out there that he may not be recovered from his leg injury, and I think that's a bunch of baloney out there. But it's one of those situations where all the pieces have to be put in the exact right place for it to even happen, let alone having the assets to make it work. And this is one of those rare situations where it did. You could even argue that the Matthew Tkachuk trade to Florida was one of those situations where Calgary was desperate because they knew they needed to get rid of this player, so they had to find the best return they could. So I think you take advantage of those situations when it actually happens. And I bet you Armstrong was kind of floored that it got that far. This was not a player I personally thought would be available.
No, but I think that's also been part of Bill Armstrong's strategy, right? He's taken advantage of teams who are kind of back themselves into a corner. So Shane Gostisbehere in Philadelphia, taking advantage of Jim Benning's love for Oliver Ekman-Larsson to cash in on that, even though OEL was only willing to move to Vancouver to Boston and to come away with what he did. And, all the other deals.
Like a desperate
Andrew Ladd.
Ottawa Senators team with Pierre Dorion, who had to get into those playoffs. He had to do it. Things were falling apart. He was going to lose his job, which he did anyway, and he was willing to give up a king's ransom for Jacob Chychrun, who just went today for a fraction of the cost. We got the 12th overall pick and 2 second-round picks. What did they get for him today? Like a second.
Nick Jensen and a third, I think.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So a third-rounder and a 34-year-old depth defenseman, right?
I actually had to look up Jensen because I was like, this must be a prospect, right?
No, 34-year-old depth defenseman. And what did Jim Benning get for OEL? A buyout and then lost his job, right? So this is classic Bill Armstrong waiting for those perfect pressure moments. And Brad, I'm with you. I don't doubt that he's going to recover from the tib-fib fracture. I mean, Keller came back from a femur, and he's better than ever, right? But I do think that tib-fib fracture caused him to have a bit of a slow season last year and was part of the impetus for some change in the organization. I don't know if he would have become available otherwise. And maybe they're telling themselves they're worried that he's not going to be 100%. I don't share that worry. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but if Keller can come back from his femur injury, I have all the faith in the world that Sergachev can come back from the tib-fib. But the point being, there's a confluence of factors, as you mentioned, compounding that make this rare opportunity arise, and you don't know when it's going to happen again. You kind of get one of these a year, maybe, but there's 32 teams in the league. So the chances that you're the one who can capitalize on it ends up being about 1 in 30, which is why we're talking about a franchise that's about 30 years old, and we can remember about one of these, right? So our number came up. Bill jumped on it. We got a guy that we can really have a lot of hope in. It's not a guarantee. There's risk associated with Mikhail Sergachev, the injury and outside of the injury. He hasn't been in this role before. He's not truly proven, not in the way that Peter Angelo was when he went to Vegas as another rare case like this. He's not proven to that level, but there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of reason to have a lot of hope in this player. And it's a trade that you have to make. You have to make that trade for Bill Armstrong. And I'm very glad that he did. And it gives all of us a ton of reason to be extremely excited for this season, not just because it's a new team with a new look and a new name and a new location, but because we've got a serious horse on defense like we haven't seen since Oliver Ekman-Larsson was in his prime.
And there seems to be serious risk with making a big deal with Bill Armstrong, right? OEL with Jim Benning, see you later. Mark Bergevin, Christian Dvorak, he's out in Montreal. Pierre Dorion with Chychrun in Ottawa. So maybe Julien Brisebois, he might be on short notice there in Tampa.
He's that meme of the Grim Reaper going door to door, you know, cartoon, and there's like blood coming out of each one. And now it's Tampa's logos on that final door. Yeah,
I feel like there's more.
That may be open and shake the hands though, or give each other a high five, because I do think this was a good win-win trade for both teams.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think John Moreno is one of those pieces that has definitely more complimentary. I know we're going to do a little bit more in-depth analysis. I gave a nice little snapshot of him today. Just for time's sake, I think we should move on to just kind of preview a little bit of what went down in the draft before we do our full draft episode. So coming into Friday night's draft, we had one first pick, the 6th overall. We came out with selecting twice in the first round. And then we also had kind of a slew of seconds and third round picks that got consolidated to get us back into the first round. So maybe didn't get to select as many times in the second, but I think, again, all of us were hammering that we need to start moving some of these assets because they all can't possibly be on the roster. So lots of smart moves here. Drafting center Cole Badois definitely helps with the center depth, definitely makes that geeky move make a lot more sense. Overall reactions for just strictly kind of the Utah draft itself.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there too about already starting to bleed prospects, right? I mean, we saw Liam Kirk a couple years ago. We saw, I think I saw Nathan Smith signed elsewhere today. He was the piece that came over in the Brian Little trade with Winnipeg. He re-signed, but Vladimir Kolyachonok was talking about going back to Russia if there wasn't more opportunity. So already getting to the point there where we're losing pieces.
Yeah, I think that consolidating was good. Kind of cashing in on the war chest component. I don't think Bill was ever planning on using all those picks. He was stockpiling a war chest, and he cashed in by bringing in a new top pair of 2 great defensemen in their prime. Perfect thing that we wanted him to do. But I think for me, my big takeaway, if we want to do like a high level overview of my general impressions of the draft, I think what the team did was make a huge statement at this draft about what they want the future identity of this team to look like. To me, this was a culture draft, top to bottom. This was a huge culture-changing statement that they made. They brought in Tisha Ginla, the bloodlines, the hard work, the nonstop motor on the ice, the impeccable character off the ice, the unmatched work ethic and drive to be the best player that he can be, to be a champion, as he was with Team Canada. Cole Badois is another champion. You'll see there's a lot of gold medals here in what they've added, and in much the same way as they're adding a lot of Stanley Cups in free agency and in trades too. I think they're bringing in that type of championship caliber player on purpose. Cole Badois is seen as the most hardworking off-ice player in the entire draft. He's chiseled, he's shredded, he's got that Rod Brindamore body. He's just a gym rat. He has this insane, obsessive process of getting better, firing 10,000 pucks a day. I don't know. I mean, he's got, you can read this really great long form article in The Athletic from Scott Wheeler, as well as there's a Barry Colts video that they put out on him about his off-ice work ethic. It's unparalleled. We'll dive into Cole Badois in a piece later this week. We'll talk about him in future podcasts, but what you need to know about him is he's a winner. He's a blood and guts player. There was a scout, an NHL scout, who told elite prospects that he could play the game without a stick and still be a benefit to his team because he's so physical. He's such a beast, and he works so hard every shift, right? He's a coach's dream. And then you add to that a big menacing defenseman in Will Skahan, who we got at the bottom of the second round because we traded our 2 earlier seconds. His dad was a strength and conditioning coach for the Anaheim Ducks. He's a California kid. His dad also worked as the strength and conditioning coach for the Minnesota Wild. This was another kid who was a huge standout at the Combine. He made it all the way from California to the United States National Team Development Program in Michigan, which is an elite level development program. He had the drive and ambition and know-how to get to that program, which has earned him a commitment to Boston College, which is an elite tier development program as well in the NCAA, right? Final Four perennial contender. They churn out elite NHL prospects constantly. He's going there. He was the captain of Team USA at several international tournaments. He's a physical beast of a player. He comes at you. He's attacking all the time. He's a mean, nasty, tough, physical, defensive defenseman. And you're going to see that Tisha Ginla is a dog on a bone. You're going to see that Cole Badois is a monster out there. He's a beast. And you're going to see that Will Skahan is a big, mean, nasty customer, as is their next pick, Thomas Lavoie. early in the third round, another top 100 pick, somebody that I wrote a spotlight on ahead of the draft, is somebody I was hoping to get in day 2. And I'm very pleased that we were able to secure Thomas Lavoie, because once again, we're talking about a monster of a defenseman here. This is a 6'4", 225-pound player. He rang in at 225 at the combine as a recently turned 18-year-old kid. He's in the
BA's got a type.
Despite his size, he can move the puck extremely well. He's got a great outlet pass. His puck moving is phenomenal for his size and strength. But again, he's a shutdown D, another beast. So what you're seeing here in this draft, and that's just, the first few picks, is that pedigree, that championship caliber, that on and off ice dedication, and those players that push the pace, play with grit, come at you, drive it straight down your throat, and never relent, right? It's an unrelenting, big, nasty, physical, skilled team that BA is building here. And I think you see that in the trades and the acquisitions and the signings today as well. I mean, Stenlund and Cole, these are not shrinking violets. These are big, nasty players. I mean, Ian Cole, funny enough, he's my first experience with a combine standout, a beast of a combine. He was known in his draft year as the Cole Baudouin, right? The monster of the combine. I remember watching on ESPN the draft footage when I was a young fella, and being enamored with this specimen that was Ian Cole. He was kind of the first one, and he was a BA pick even back then. So it all aligns with the vision that BA has for this team, and it has a nice rhyme with what he was building in St. Louis when he drafted Cole Baudouin, when he drafted Parayko and Pietrangelo, when he brought on board Shen and O'Reilly and these championship caliber, hardworking players that he ultimately did win a Stanley Cup with. I think you're seeing Bill cooking in the same manner once again, this time with Utah, trying to build something very special. And it all starts with the culture, and it all starts with the draft. And I think that this draft was one that set the stage nicely, where we can get a real glimpse into the plan of the master himself, Bill Armstrong.
And finally, Bill Armstrong goes back to the OHL.
Yeah.
He had made no OHL picks in his time with the Coyotes. The last Coyote to be drafted, the 2018 draft was Barrett Hayton. And then I think there was 2 other players that same year, but 6 years without any picks from that draft. And I don't know if that's I would suspect it was because of the COVID shutdown. It was the only major league to go without a whole season. And that's from a development timeline standpoint, that's a huge loss, right? So to be able to skip over the players who missed that full season and to finally dip back to that league, you look at just the numbers. It is the top development league for all the different leagues that feed into the NHL. And it makes sense too, right? If you look at Bill Armstrong's track record, not only is he an OHL graduate himself, but all the different pieces who helped win the Stanley Cup in St. Louis: Jordan Binnington, Jordan Kyrou, Robert Thomas, Pietrangelo. I think probably a good half of that team was from the OHL. So
O'Reilly, right?
O'Reilly. Yeah. So really cool to see him dip back to that league.
Yeah, absolutely. Feels good, man. Feels good. Yeah. It's been a good weekend. I think that the draft went great. I think the trades went great. I think free agency's been great, as much for what we didn't do as for what we did. It feels good. I'm really excited for development camp to get started, training camp, all of that. Of course,
development's already started.
Yeah. And of course, Brad, we'll be bringing you a lot more content before then, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been posting videos that we're getting from the Utah Hockey Club's account or fans. So make sure you giving us a follow on X at Clean Hits Hockey, and make sure to give us a subscribe at cleanhits.substack.com. You can find information about the Discord we have, where we got plenty of users that are just keeping me up all night with how much chatter we have about the team. It's an awesome community. We hope that you want to join it and become part of it too, because this is a very special and exciting franchise with the way it's kind of being built up with this management team. We've said it before, we will say it again, but we are all part of the cult of Bill Armstrong, and
that's right.
so far, so good. So that is going to be our episode 3, kind of talking and recapping about this big weekend we had. We may try to squeeze in another stream this week that we're just going to kind of talk about the kind of general level of free agency and where the NHL teams sit, and then be on the lookout for our more in-depth draft podcast, where we are going to really dissect kind of all the players that we drafted And we will be releasing spotlight features on, of course, all of the players that we've picked up in free agency and via trade and through the draft throughout the summer. So keep your eyes out. We got tons of great content coming out here. And have a happy Canada Day and a happy USA Day. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you guys.